My honor to welcome you here today. My name is Dr. Whitney Thomas, and I am Ignite's Southeast Major Gifts Director. And I have been with Ignite since 2013, when Texas was just the second state in Ignite's history. And boy, do things look really different in so many ways at this point. But as always, I'm excited to be in a space with folks who care about women's issues and electing more women to office and all of the good things that Ignite's doing. And if you don't know, which I have a feeling you probably do, Ignite is a national movement of young women who are ready and eager to own their political power. And I am happy to be here tonight with some amazing speakers, some awesome Ignite staff members, and all of you who joined us tonight. And Lauren Walter, our Southeast Program Manager, is going to be moderating the conversation tonight. But I just wanted to brag on her and tell you how incredible she is. She's been with Ignite since 2018 as both a fellow and all of the leadership positions that we have available for our young women. I feel like Lauren has served in all of those positions, and now she is leading programs in the Southeast region for us, and she's in Atlanta. So we're super excited to have her tonight moderating, and I will kick it over to you, Lauren.
Whitney, that's so sweet. Whitney is like a mentor to me, so I really appreciate that lovely introduction. I am so pumped to be with you all here today. The leaked SCOTUS opinion and the swift and sweeping response we have seen across the country is sending a loud and clear message against the revocation of a decision that has provided the legal foundation for so much progress we have made as a country. This is a historic moment, and we know it will be the call to action that can pave the way for so many Gen Zers to embrace their voice and leadership. And we know that Gen Zers know how to lead a movement, okay? So I challenge you all to really lean into the knowledge that we are going to receive today from our wonderful panels. We are here to learn, we are here to be curious, and we are here to learn new perspectives on the impact this decision would have and how we as a community can take action. Because, you know, here at Ignite, we love a good call to action. So I would first love to thank our speakers for being here today. First, we have Dr. Shauna Shames, the Associate Professor of Political Science at Rutgers Camden. And then we have Jackie Castillas, Donor Relations Manager of the Pacific Southwest. And then we have Kinjo Kiima, Director of Youth Organizing and Campaigns Manager of Young Women of Color. And we also have Dr. Sophia Yen, co-founder of Pandia Health. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited for this conversation. Before we get started, I'd love for our participants today to share their pronouns and where they're calling from. I'm calling from Hotlanta, okay? And you know, we know Georgia is a critical state in this fight, as Dr. Yen mentioned earlier. So as those responses are coming in, let me get started. Why don't we first start with Shauna? Could you please share with us what Roe versus Wade is and why it is important for protecting a whole host of rights, and what impact do you see on our political landscape if it were to be overturned?
Sure, I'm happy to try. I just want everybody to know I got the agenda and it gave me about 3 minutes to do that, which, you know, I'm an academic. You can't clear your throat in 3 minutes. So I'm going to do my best. People write whole books on, you know, much less than this though. So guys, deep breath. All right. I'm trying to think of how to put this. I think you probably all know what Roe v. Wade was. Very briefly, a Supreme Court decision from 1973 saying that because of an inherent right to privacy in the Constitution, which by the way, isn't actually in the Constitution, but I'll get to that in a second. States cannot illegalize abortion. And in particular, it kind of created a balancing system of rights looking at different trimesters of pregnancy. And all of the reasoning that went into this is in some ways really problematic. And those problems are coming back to haunt us right now. So it's not a surprise to me that Roe's really weak and that it may fall shortly. But I want to, it's hard to imagine the kind of pre-Roe world that women lived in if you, are, Gen Z or even millennial, right? The restriction of your ability to kind of be who you are the kinds of things we think are essential to identity and expression and full personhood now in terms of sexuality and gender identity. Like none of this was possible in a pre-Roe world. And women died constantly from illegal abortions. It is just a truism that abortion is going to happen. So when it's made illegal, like in most states pre-Roe, it absolutely harms women and girls who can get pregnant very early, and it can absolutely change and sometimes end their lives if they do not have access to good health care on this. So this was a terrible situation for a whole lot of people, and Roe completely changed the landscape of US reproductive life. And in terms of jurisprudence, as in a set of constitutional provisions, it became the basis for a host of other civil rights, especially sexual, like the idea in Lawrence v. Texas that you cannot outlaw gay sex between men, which, guys, wasn't until a decade and a half ago. It was really recent that we came to that decision. Other decisions on reproductive life, sexual life, your own identity and your gender identity. Okay, so Roe has been the basis, not just Roe, but the cases that were the basis for Roe and Roe together form this little nexus of cases about privacy and your right to make your own decisions in a private way. That I think has been essential in changing our views on kind of civil rights and what we should be allowed to do as human beings, what are basic human rights in terms of sex, gender, sexuality, and reproduction. So that being said, the imminent fall of Roe is absolutely really frightening, right? In terms of the access to basic health care for women, right? The idea that we would go back to a time when women and girls could die in mass in back alley abortions is absolutely frightening. It feels medieval. The idea of a world without Roe is kind of horrific in a lot of ways. So in that way, we're in a terribly frightening moment, and I'm sure you all are feeling that. I also just want to say though, if we can find a way through the next couple years, it's still going to be a terrible moment for women and girls in terms of reproduction and a narrowing of civil rights, right? But ultimately, I'm an eternal optimist, and I have been working in kind of the underground abortion networks in every city that I've lived in, and I've driven probably hundreds of patients to clinics, right? This is what I do in my spare time. And as a political scientist, I can tell you these networks are ramping up right now, right? So we are going to find ways. I think you're going to hear later from these fabulous panelists about some of these ways. We're going to find ways to get women and girls and all other people who find themselves pregnant against their will to the kinds of care that they need. And I think you can't actually go back to medieval times in an internet age, but I think Sophia will talk more about that. As an eternal optimist and political scientist, though, Roe had some major flaws in terms of its legal theorizing of this absolutely critical set of human rights. And this is, while a terrible moment, also, I don't want you to be so devastated that you can't organize, because this is an opportunity to reshape law, the kind you only get once every couple decades, if at all, to reshape law to focus on the actual needs and current positions and beliefs and kind of lived experiences of the people who need these rights. And in particular here, I'm thinking of a right to privacy does not do much for people who cannot pay for that right, for people who don't know about it, for people who cannot access it, right? So actually, we've been living that post-Roe world in a lot of places around the country already. And we have the networks to we've been building in the last couple decades, the networks to try to get women around the country from the places that are like back in time in the pre-Roe world to the present. If we think about the future, right, I think women of color, people of multiple sexualities and multiple genders are the future of this country. And eventually politics and then law are going to catch up with where you guys who are the future actually are. So we need to focus not on privacy. It's a poor basis for an absolutely fundamental human right. And I think there's lots of better ways we could frame this right, some of which we'll hear about. So I just want to say, it's going to be a tough time, but you guys, I think we can, if we all hold hands here, we can kind of circle the country and help those who need it for now. And then we've got to change the laws and politics to a better vision. What is it we want from reproductive policy?
I really appreciate that, Dr. Shauna. Before we move on to the next question or to the next panelist, I would like to remind folks to use inclusive language when referring to folks with reproductive systems instead of using the term women and or girls. I would really appreciate it. Thank you. And I'd love to hear other perspectives from our other panelists on how you believe this will impact communities.
The statistic that I just heard that was really kind of horrifying, shocking, but obvious when you think about it, but just you had to think about it. And I think all of us knew this was coming. 95% of, the reproductive rights movement is like, it will be overturned because we have 5 really conservative judges. The only prayer was that Roberts could get them together and not do this because he didn't want it to happen on his watch. He didn't want it to be his legacy. And maybe he's the one that leaked it because someone was saying, somebody maybe leaked it in hopes that we could pass the Women's Health Protection Act, in hopes that we could get the ERA passed, in hopes that we could publicly humiliate the Supreme Court justices and anybody related to any of them to pressure them not to do this to those of us with uteri. And so the statistic I want to share with you all is they're estimating 300,000 people with uteri are going to have to leave their state every year. That's 1,000 people a day, roughly, that will have to leave their state every year. And if you have some stupid law where you have to hang out for 24 hours or some crap like that, then even more time, more money. But that's a lot of people. Isn't that like 10% of our population? Or I don't know. The math right now, my head hurts. But the other thing is that 60,000 people with uteri will be forced to continue a pregnancy they don't want to continue. And that is not in the person's interest with the uteri. It's not in the family because 60% of people that want to terminate already have a child. And therefore, oftentimes there will be a family involved. And 75% of people that terminate don't have funds. And so to put this undue burden is just ridiculous. I'm using all the legal terms I possibly can. I'm not a lawyer, but I like to invoke stuff. So just that's what I wanted to add to that. And I really think that we need to frame this as also freedom of religion. The Muslim religion, the Jewish faith, treasure the person who is here rather than the potential person. And if this pregnancy is at risk to your body, they would rather that you terminate the pregnancy and have more babies in the future. Or my thing is, if I were to die, I think my family, my husband would be very sad and left with 2 daughters that he'd have to take care of on his own. And if same on him, like if he were to leave me, I would be very angry to be left with 2 daughters. And it is not in my daughter's or my husband's interest that I leave this world. And exactly as Dr. Shamas said, nothing will come between a woman and a wanted pregnancy and an unwanted pregnancy, was what my OB-GYN professor taught me. And that means if somebody with a uterus wants to get pregnant, they will get pregnant. And if they want to terminate, they will do everything in their power to do so. And I want to give 2 stories because I think if we can share these stories, liberal Berkeley, California, where we pay for your abortions. A single mom took her son's hamster thing, put it up her uterus, and tried to terminate her pregnancy, and ended up having to take out her uterus so she could have no more babies in the future. Luckily, she didn't die of sepsis. But you could imagine if it was a teenager, she might have stayed at home, had the chills, and be like, oh, I got COVID, so I'm just staying home. And it would have been a different story. But this is in Berkeley, California, the most liberal city and the most liberal state. If that's what happens there, what happens in other states where it's not liberal, not educated, just like crazy horrible. And then I'm an adolescent medicine specialist. So this is what I heard. 2 teenagers in Texas, young woman pregnant, cute little couple, didn't want to be pregnant. So she asked him to help her terminate the pregnancy. So he takes a bat and beats on her uterus, hoping to, terminate a pregnancy. He goes to jail for manslaughter and she goes to wherever for whatever. And if we had gotten them a safe termination, and as we all know, if you don't know, first trimester abortion is safer than continuing a pregnancy in this country because of the maternal mortality statistics that we have in this country. And just in general, pregnancy is a risky thing. Bad things can happen. It would have been different. So that was even before this. Just imagine going forward. Luckily, we have medication abortion, and everybody, I want to put a shout out, check out plancpills.org. It's a nonprofit founded by Francine Coito, who was critical in getting either emergency contraception over the counter or getting pharmacists to dispense emergency contraception. And then she came up with the phrase Plan C. And this is the radical idea I want to put out there. Plan A is your normal birth control. Plan B, and its generics, but even better, Ella, emergency contraception, is Plan B. And then Plan C, her radical idea is you don't even check a pregnancy test. So nobody can anything on you. Just you miss a period, you pop the pills in Plan C. And so there is nothing. You're just making your period regular. So that is the radical idea of Plan C, but plancpills.org is a place you can go to find medication abortion, telemedicine, medication abortion. And then there is also a sub company there that is the Woman on Waves, who takes women out on ships, not here, but anyway, she's amazing. And she's done something for the United States that you can get pills from India. And they're safe. Most of our drugs actually come from India. 95% of the drugs in the United States generic is coming from India already. So don't be afraid of India. Just be afraid if it's a sketch pharmacy that you don't know. But anything on plancpills.org, I trust.
Love the resources. Thank you. Jackie or Kinjo, would you like to?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, my name is Kinjo Kiyama. I'm the Director of Organizing and Campaigns at Advocates for Youth, where I work with young women and non-binary folks of color. So we train and support young organizers all over the country in running issue-based campaigns that make tangible changes in their schools, in their communities related to reproductive rights and justice. To me, this moment just really shows how right-wing this country is. of course, many of us who work around abortion access and other issues that are essential to bodily autonomy could have predicted this moment for a long time, as the right wing has openly said ending Roe was their clear goal. However, it is really shocking and honestly disturbing to just see our rights being further stripped away in real time. I think, what keeps me going in this moment is just my love for my community and the belief and the knowledge that we all deserve so much more. When I think of the future of abortion being illegal in so many places in this country, I think about the other Black women like me who are already going through so much, living in a racist, misogynistic, violent society that only values us for what we can produce and doesn't see us as human. And on top of that, to then potentially be arrested for getting an abortion or for having a miscarriage, it's just really horrifying that things are already this bad, because even with Roe, so many people, especially people of color, especially young people, don't have access, and things are just actively getting worse. So, while I've honestly felt, a lot of just despair over these last few days, as I imagine many of y'all have also felt, I really try to remember the words of Miriam Kaba, who's an abolitionist activist, her comment about hope being a discipline, and just really not allowing the oppression all around us to crush our imagination and our sense of optimism and possibility. So, in difficult moments like this, where it feels really hard to kind of like see this vision of the future that we're fighting for, when things feel like they're sort of just sliding backwards, I really try to think of leaders, activists, and organizers who came before us, generations before us, or who are activists in other countries who've accomplished great things. Like, what if all of those people had given up? Personally, I think of those in the movements of the 60s and 70s, like the Black Power movement, Civil Rights movement, who've come before me for inspiration, as well as activists in other countries like Mexico, who have pushed to decriminalize abortion and make huge changes that I would imagine people around them said would not be possible even as they were fighting for them. I feel like this really just grounds me in the fact that we can't back down, we can't give up. The future of our communities depends on us taking collective action and fighting for a better world. And I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about how to effectively organize for reproductive justice.
I love that. Hope is a discipline. That's perfect. Jackie, would you like
Sure. My colleagues have said so much and said it so well that I guess I would only add, my name is Jackie Casillas. I'm a donor relations manager with Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest. I'm also a council member in a local city, Southern California city of Corona. And I'm also a new mom with a child, 3-month-old child who was conceived through IVF. And I'm sorry that she's contributing, but she's very worked up because of this as well. And so when I think about what happens, the impact of a post-Roe world, I think about not just the future generations, but I think about what this could mean to all of our other rights. Dr. Shamus mentioned about the basis of the protection for Roe is the basis for the protection of all these other rights. And, just like we called it before the 2018 election or the 2016 election, when we knew that elections have consequences, this will be the first domino in the domino effect of all the others. You will see bans for IVF, which is the way we conceive my child, for bans for contraception, bans for same-sex marriage, bans, all of these civil rights that we have that are our rights and decisions to make, they will be next. And so I don't believe that I'm being, extreme when I say that, because look at where we are now. So when I think about what's going to happen next, that's what we need to think about, how aggressively these states are coming after our rights.
Definitely. And your baby is so precious. I'm so happy she's fired up. We love to see it. While we have you, I wanted to ask you also, what does it mean to you when we talk about reproductive justice as a mainstream movement? How does it weed out certain people, and how can we open up the space?
I'll jump in first, and then because she's quiet for a minute. So, when we talk about justice, we have to think about equity. and which, who is getting left behind by these decisions and who already has access. Because the reality is that, those who are already hurting are going to hurt more because of this. And just because abortion will be outlawed in some states, 26 states who have trigger laws, believe me, the people who have access to wealth and privilege will still have access to abortion. It's those people who do not have, who are marginalized, who will be left behind. So when we talk about justice, we've got to absolutely center the communities that will be further marginalized because of this decision, and activate both activate, work with, be led by, and ensure that we are, doing this and providing assistance there. So that's all I have to contribute on that one.
Thank you. Would love to hear more thoughts from our other speakers.
Yeah, reproductive justice is a really holistic framework. It's more than just legal rights we need, but what we actually need is access and real resources. So Sister Song, kind of the group that came up with this concept, along with other partners and people of color, they define it as the right to have a child, the right to not have a child, and the right to parent a child or children in safe and healthy environments. So again, it's not just about choice, but it's about access. So if someone legally on paper could access an abortion, but there's no way that they could afford it, and there's a million barriers to them accessing the care they need, that's not a real choice. And I think when we talk about, the mainstream movement and how it weeds out certain people and how we can open up the space, I really think that, white feminism, or feminism without intersectionality that centers white perspectives at the expense of others, is really just more white supremacy. We need to consider all women, all gender expansive folks who can have abortions, and that patriarchal violence is the root of these issues, but that patriarchy does not stand alone. It's inherently connected to white supremacy, capitalism, and other systems of oppression. And we have to tackle all systems of oppression, and gender and sexuality issues are not, this separate thing, right? And Black women and other women of color and, other gender expansive folks of color are experiencing multiple forms of oppression at once, at the same time, that are all connected to tear us down and keep us where we're at, right? So when we speak about the mainstream movement and how it's leaving people out, honestly, I think it's as simple as racism being common and acceptable in mainstream feminist spaces. I think that, many people act like maybe white women invented or own the concept of fighting patriarchal violence, that feminism was a white women's thing. And to me, that's quite absurd. And so I really encourage folks on the call, especially white folks, really think intentionally about the spaces that you're part of and that you're creating. Never act like you're doing people of color a favor by respecting us and listening to our opinions, and really think about the framework that you're operating in, right? Think about reproductive rights and versus reproductive justice, and white feminism versus intersectional feminism. So do you just want to be equal to white men, or do you want to end all forms of oppression and domination? Because those are two very different things. And I think one is a white feminist approach and not an intersectional one, right? Intersectional feminism to me is about ending oppression and domination overall, not just elevating some women and throwing other folks under the bus. So I can think of many examples of how mainstream feminist spaces alienate people of color. For example, the common use of Handmaid's Tale imagery. While, I totally get the points that the books were trying and show were trying to make. I mean, the plot is basically, what if things that happened to Black women during slavery happened to white women, right? So when people say things like, wow, we never thought this could happen here, and people are surprised or shocked by draconian laws that are being passed to strip our rights away, that kind of makes me feel a bit like people don't know the history of what Black women and other people of color have gone through and still go through today in the United States with, in regards to reproductive oppression. And then in terms of other ways that I think movement spaces leave people out and are not as inclusive as they could be, I think it's also important for us to think about classism in movement spaces, when many people who are not involved in the movement hear the word feminism, they might think of college educated white women, right? So again, think of, is your work accessible to people of all classes? If everyone in your space has more access to wealth and resources and perhaps works a professional 9-to-5 job, it may be time to kind of assess like who isn't in the room and why that is. And I think, and Lauren, I appreciated you reminding us to make sure that we're not only saying women are accessing abortion or not being able to access abortion. I think it's really important for us to aggressively oppose transphobia as well, and to remember that non-binary people, trans men, and other gender expansive people are also losing access to abortion and have unique barriers that I know as a cis woman I would never experience, right? And I think, we really need to challenge TERFs and people who frame trans rights and women's rights as if they're at odds with each other, because we really need to uplift and support one another and remember that the enemy is the patriarchy and not one another. So I think I just really encourage people to reflect and learn from people with different perspectives, and to just really remember that all of these political issues are interconnected. Abortion rights are not, separate from everything else. And I think, as an activist, it's also really important to question everything that we have been taught and honestly indoctrinated into in this country, right? Because systems of oppression don't just maintain themselves. There's all these things people have to be, whether it's through propaganda or other ways of sort of brainwashing, taught to believe. So I really encourage people to listen and learn, look carefully at the world around you, learn history, read theory, and think critically. And I really encourage folks to learn from Black feminists and other thinkers of color. While it's vital and important to take action, which I know we'll be talking about a little bit later, I think it's also just really important to make sure people have a solid understanding of reproductive justice and intersectional feminism and how that is different than, mainstream feminism, I would say, and that theory and action go hand in hand.
Thanks so much, Kinjo. I couldn't help but take some of those quotes down. And Jackie, I know you had a hard stop at the 30 mark. So if you want to head out, I really appreciate your time and expertise.
Thank you. I just want to say, Kinjo, you hit the nail on the head 1,000%. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Be safe. Bye. All right. Shauna, Dr. Shauna, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, absolutely. I'm loving the kind of reaction to Kinjo in particular from the audience, who this is clearly kind of hitting a nerve. So this is where I think the future is. We've been talking about reproductive justice within feminism, I think for about 30 years now. That's at least the time I've been hearing about it, but I think we have a much more nuanced understanding now. And I love the addition of capitalism as well as racism and sexism and heterosexism as systems of oppression. The people that I spend my kind of spare time helping, who are primarily identify as women, but of course are not all. So that's, that was probably me using the term just based on lived experience of who I have helped here. Not to discount trans experience. The kind of lived experience of these people is that class oppression is not separate from racial oppression, is not separate from gender oppression. And often there's not the words or the language to explain any of this. But I get to have conversations with people in my car a whole lot about their lives and to hear about, so I can kind of classify the barriers. And the lack of basic education and information about how your body works is the most vital and dangerous thing that I keep seeing over and over that makes people land in my car and in the cars of other volunteers. And I think it's absolutely a violation of human rights that people are not taught, are not able to have consent over what happens to their body because they don't know what is happening or why. The kind of most basic autonomy decisions about one's daily life. Often people have those decisions made for them so that they end up, before they're 20 with multiple children. And then I meet them when they're trying not to have the fifth or the sixth child, right? But often never thought about, did they want that first one? Was that okay with them? That was life. That was just life. And that's what the life of a whole lot of people was before feminism, right? Before we had a term for sexual harassment, it used to be, that's life, honey, right? Your boss will hit on you. Before we had a term for domestic violence, before these things were illegal in law, before we recognized that they violate basic human rights, there has to be an understanding of what is the lived experience and how can we then intervene in law? So somebody was asking in the chat, if it's not choice as a framework within a context of privacy, what would be the basis, right? One legal basis we could work towards, as to King Joe's kind of, utopian ideal, which I fully support and second, about reproductive justice, right? What does that look like in a legal framework where we're in a country that is far more interested in keeping tyranny away rather than supporting individuals to live the life that they want to live, such that we have a framework of negative liberty pervading our laws? We're not very good, actually, compared to other democracies at doing the things that would make life high quality and worth living. Like, we're just starting to learn how to not just reject tyranny, which is our American kind of ideal of ourselves, but also kind of support positive human rights. And a positive human right would be not only the right, I see in the comments, to kind of comprehensive sex education. Well, yeah, it's like how your body works. The most basic, getting a user's manual to this body that you inherit, that we can't be fully human without being able to make choices about how it is used. But a human right to then have the state help, right? When you are in a situation like Sophia is talking about, where you are desperate to have a baby and can't, or where you are desperate not to have a baby, or where you are desperate for your children to have better opportunities, where you're desperate for them not to live in an environmentally degraded area. All kinds of things, not just about reproduction, but the caring for those children and the valuing of, right? All of that would be part of a reproductive justice framework. It's a much larger vision, and we don't have good jurisprudence, as in constitutional rules and then court decisions based on those rules, to support that utopian vision yet, right? We're going to have to build that really from the ground up. Roe being based in a framework of negative liberty is not nearly enough to support what I see as the future. And certainly, has always left out poor women and women of color, women who lack the resources and information that they need, right? It leaves behind those who most need help. So what do we do to make sure the state, the government, is doing the kind of positive things that we need to do? That's a different framework of law. So those of you interested in law school, that's where I think we should be going. I mentioned in the chat, one possible source of new rights would be, as Josie Shaw is saying, a larger safety net, right? Most countries that we would compare ourselves to, post-industrial kind of post-materialistic democracies, especially in Eastern Asia, in Western Europe, in Oceania, right? The countries that we like to compare ourselves to in my discipline in political science, we are far behind in terms of the basic social safety net that provides not just the basics of life, but kind of the things that make for human dignity and human flourishing. So anyway, I could go on about the social safety net for forever, but I urge you, if you're thinking about what direction to take your activism and to kind of think about the legal underpinning of reproductive justice, you have to think about a larger idea of what role you want the state to play. Law means the government is involved. So what do you want your government to do and to be? I think the Supreme Court is wildly out of step with American public opinion here. But we've not had a good kind of set of movement entrepreneurs yet who could show politicians and judges what we want as Americans from our government. So that's the next step.
Professor, I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I would love to remind folks to put their questions in the chat because we're going to do a little short Q&A afterwards. I wanted to take it to you, Dr. Yen. Why is this moment different from the past? I know we've been talking a lot about urgency. I mean, things aren't great right now, and this would just worsen what's been going on, but why is this moment different?
I think that, being a doctor, being a person who believes in science and a person with medications that can manipulate things, two key differences. One, a lot of people has, said, don't invoke the hanger, the hanger imagery of coat hanger abortions, because now we have medication abortion. And I looked up the price and I was like, somehow in my head, I had a medication abortion was like $700, $800. And I realized that's like because of, no offense, evil lawyers and litigation and liability, but the drugs themselves are $65. $65. And so, as I mentioned, the question is whether you'd find a doctor who'd be willing to take the liability of writing that drug for you, because they are writing for everybody and they're not being too discriminate because they want to give it to everybody. But if a crazy anti were to write it and then sue them, then that doctor loses their license and their whole livelihood. And I went through 12 years of extra education than my husband. I pulled an all-nighter every fourth night for 3 years in a row. I've been through hell and I'm not going to lose my license. Sorry, you're going to have to find someone else to volunteer for that situation. And thank goodness for all the saints out there for people who provide abortion. But I would love everybody to get a set of those pills, anybody with a uterus of reproductive age, to get a set of those pills. So that's one, idea out there that, you can get it from India. You just got to, and get it advance of need. Don't be like, oh my God, I need it now. And then know your birth control options, know your medication abortion options. And the key thing there is it works out to 10 weeks, which is 6 weeks after a missed period. And I remember back in the day when I wasn't on such good birth control, if I missed one period, I'd wait for the next one, right? And then if the next one didn't come, then you were totally screwed. But sometimes just the stress of it pushes your period out even further. Your body is just mean because your body's like, oh my goodness, she's like stressed out. So now is not a good time to have a baby. So I'm not going to pop out an egg. And then if you don't pop out an egg and then not fertilize it, then you don't get your period. So the more stressed you are, the further your period goes. And it's just mean. But so we cannot any longer wait for that second missed period, because that is 8 weeks. And it may take you 2 weeks to go get the drugs or figure it out and whatnot. And Texas, being horrid, is at 6 weeks. And like I said, a lot of us, we miss that period and we're just waiting for the next period. And 6 weeks is not part of this wait till the second missed period that many of us, have gone through. So number 2 is know your emergency contraception. So everybody's pushing Plan B, and my hashtag is Plan B is not all that. Please make sure you all know that if your BMI is 26 or greater, and my BMI is 25, and thanks to Mother's Day and some COVID laziness, it hits 26 every now and then. If your BMI is 26 or greater, and 60% of the United States population is that, so 2 out of 3 people should be like, oh, that's me. Then Plan B and its generics don't work so well. And then if your BMI is 30, it doesn't work at all. Does not work at all. And so you can take 2, but there's a better option. It's called Ella. It's prescription only. And if a doctor writes it and you have insurance, thank you, former President Obama. Thank you, current President Biden. They passed the Affordable Care Act, so it's available with no copay, no deductible, AKA free. So if you have insurance and your doctor writes for Ella emergency contraception, you can get it for free. And at Pandia Health, we always like, you want some emergency contraception with that? And then we recommend Ella. But if you really want Plan B for some weird reason, because you've been brainwashed by the drug company, sure. But if it were me, my daughter, my friend, my patient, I would go with the Ella because it works better at every time point and it works up to a BMI of 35. So if I'm trying to avoid pregnancy, I want the one that works better. I want the one that works up to a BMI of 35 because I have to eat a lot of food to get up to a BMI of 35. But it's possible. I gained like 8 pounds in one weekend in Chicago because there was so much good food. But it's free under the Affordable Care Act if you're on insurance. If you don't have money or insurance, Title 10, everything's free at that clinic, and it's a sliding scale. So always protect Title 10 when you hear about it. It's a federal funded program. And then if your insurance is trying to charge you, there's National Women's Law Center, coverher.org, and they will help you in yelling at your insurance company. Also, local attorneys, the San Francisco city attorney is looking at suing particular insurances for not providing birth control when they're supposed to provide birth control. So when you tell people this is happening, then they can sue people in a good way, the good lawyers versus the bad lawyers and whatnot. And then third, I know I said I only had 2 points, but third is making hashtag periods optional. So I saw trending on Twitter, but maybe just my Twitter because it tailors towards you, is should I delete my period info off an app? And so at first it was like, they're going to sell your information, blah, blah, blah. And as a for-profit company, I would never sell your information without your permission, but that's me. We are the only women-founded, women-led, the only doctor-led company in this space. And I wouldn't put it past my, compatriots to sell your information. But more importantly, it could be subpoenaed in a court of law. And they'd be like, oh, you had a period and it went away and then it came back. Did you Google abortion at any time? Did you Google mifepristone, misoprostol, Plan B, Plan C? Did you attend a talk by Dr. Yen, hosted on behalf of Ignite? And I saw on this day at this time in your calendar that you didn't have a period and then you got your period. And it may have been a spontaneous abortion, but they may use this to pin you down despite all of our options. So unfortunately, we have to go back to paper and pen. And even then you got to hide it. You can't tell anybody, you got to come up with a secret code or something like that. But even better, I am a proponent of hashtag periods optional. So if you go on the IUD, the implant or shot, there's a 30% chance of you having no period. So if there's nothing to track, they can't come after you. And then 70% is lighter. And if it's irregular, they have nothing on you. Or maybe just throw in some fake data. But the other part is I personally, in trying to get pregnant with my first child, realized the only reason those of us with uteri bleed is because we didn't get pregnant that month. Every month from age 12 and a half, roughly, we build that lining. And we're like, embryo? Oh, no embryo, bleed. And then we build up that lining again. Embryo? No embryo, bleed. Every time we build that lining, we risk endometrial cancer. Every time we pop out an egg, we don't know if the pop or the heel, we risk ovarian cancer. And the only other way to decrease your risk of ovarian cancer is take out your ovaries, which I don't recommend. But if you can turn off your ovaries for 5 years with the pill, the patch, the ring, you decrease your risk of ovarian cancer by 50%. And so if you're on the pill, patch, ring, you can actually skip that week of bleeding. It's totally arbitrary. You can make it every 3 months, every 6 months, or never. I haven't bled for the past 12 years, my last child, as long as I take my pill. So I have no data that anyone could subpoena, but it's also a way to access birth control without it being birth control. This is about menstrual manipulation. This is about, I like to throw in tiger mom, tiger Asian mom in Silicon Valley. My daughter is going to crush your daughter on the SAT because my daughter has no chance of bleeding on the SAT. And your daughter has a 1 in 4 chance of bleeding on the SAT. And all the people with uteri on this call, you're going to do better on finals bleeding or not bleeding, MCAT bleeding or not bleeding, LSAT, GRE, or your Olympic sports championship. I think the answer is not bleeding. So this is a way to open access. No longer is it a birth control pill. It's an estrogen progesterone pill, a hormonal treatment, and then just a public service announcement. I'm always doing Pandia public service announcements, PSA. The number one cause of missed school and work in somebody under the age of 25 with a uterus is bad, evil periods. So if you know anyone that's missing school or work because of bad, evil periods, please see a physician, because they might have endometriosis, fibroids, or PCOS. And we have medicine and technology. You don't have to suffer. People like, it runs in my family. I got it. My aunt got it. My sister has it. My grandma has it. And we all just drink some whiskey back in the day. But we have ibuprofen. So just so you know, first line treatment is 600 milligrams, 3 times a day, 600 milligrams, 3 times a day with food. If you don't take it with food, you'll have an ulcer. Don't blame me. I told you, take it with food for up to 5 days. And that will decrease the pain by 30%. And if that fails, then you got to go on the pill, patch ring, or IUD, or implant, or shot. But please, let's all be productive, those of us with uteri. But also another way to manipulate your period so that they can't track you, so they can't come after us.
Right. And okay, so I appreciate the paranoia, which I think is real. And I think that's important to keep in mind. Also, though, we could change the laws about what is, particularly those who might try to come after you about that period data, that could be made illegal. We could also, I mean, right now, somebody asked in the chat about like, what is the legal situation about getting the pills from India, or getting, you know, whatever. It's going to be a huge, like, thorny rat's nest for the next couple years, I think, as we figure out the laws. If Roe falls, though, there will be no national unifying framework. States are all going to come up with various and weird and idiosyncratic and different arrangements. And then we're going to have a set of federalism questions like, can the state of Texas sue me in New Jersey if I help a Texas woman come to New Jersey for an abortion, right? Or help get her birth control. You know, there's a whole growing movement of abortion doulas, right? People who are going to help you get an abortion either medically or surgically, or help you get to where you need to go. There's a collective called Bridget that will help you travel longer distances. There's the National Network of Abortion Funds. In, you know, most states, there's a fund and or a practical support group like mine, and we're gearing up to kind of have a much larger influx of people. And so it's actually a huge legal question right now. Can we be sued for this? I don't know. Bring it on. Let's have some test cases, because I would love for the state of Texas to try to sue me right now. That would be a fabulous platform for us to talk about what we want in a country and what we want from, you know, for reproductive access and justice. Like, we actually don't know. That said, there are people who know a lot more than me. And I put in the chat, there's all kinds of helplines. There's a medical helpline, there's a legal helpline. Like, you can call people who actually know these things and talk to lawyers and, you know, see, will I get arrested if I help somebody cross state lines? Probably not. There's a small chance. You know, can I be sued for, you know, there is some liability. So if you are concerned, you should ask somebody. We talk about it with my group. There's a small chance. So you have to be willing to do that if you want to do this work. My feeling is, yeah, bring it on. Let's all get arrested, and let's see if they can make charges stick against me in Texas. Good luck.
Yeah, when I just think about, you know, why this moment is so different from the past, I feel like, you know, while this moment is one that so many of us were like bracing ourselves for, it really doesn't make it any easier. This moment feels like a turning point, but it's also, we should remember that Roe was the floor and not the ceiling, right? Like, the bare minimum of abortion access in this country is like barely there in so many parts of the country. And what is there is now just being dismantled. So I really agreed with Shauna's comments about us being behind so many other countries earlier. I feel like we need universal access to healthcare, and healthcare, of course, includes abortion, because abortion is healthcare. And, you know, we know that so many people, especially people of color, young people, others who are more marginalized, already don't have the abortion access they need and deserve, right? So to me, the key difference in this moment, as we were just, talking about with, surveillance, criminalization, is just the risk of criminalization. And as soon as Roe falls, I think close to half of states will have sort of trigger laws. And Black people, other people of color are already, really seen as criminals in the eyes of the state. So once it's fully illegal in about 23 states, I would imagine, they will go after people to try and arrest them. Criminalization is going to increase. And as Dr. Yen pointed out, surveillance is also a really serious risk as well, especially for those who are already, again, seen as inherently criminal, like Black folks. So, I hope while this escalation of attacks on our bodily autonomy continues, because, as abortion rights are under attack, it's also that attacks on queer and trans people are also escalating. And as another panelist mentioned, this could really be like a domino effect before contraceptive access, gay marriage, other rights are also struck down. I hope that in this moment, we realize the importance of collective action and making real demands and not backing down. The time for us to organize and to escalate is now. We have seen just the absolute failure of institutions to meet people's needs. And we are also seeing the failure of people in power who will act like they care about abortion, but really it's all just talk, and they'll stab us in the back by not stepping up to the plate when their influence is needed the most. And while we've seen that, we've also seen ordinary people coming together to meet these needs, right? Like the amazing work of abortion funds, abortion doulas, practical support networks. So more than ever, this is really the time to build momentum and fight for a new world. And I really hope and believe that we can pull together all the resources, people, and organized groups on our side to demand what's right. And I just want to remind us that we're everything we need and we're the ones we've been waiting for.
Thank you so much, Kijo, and thank you so much, Professor Shamus and Dr. Yen. I so appreciate you sharing this 1 hour with us today. I know I really appreciated it. I feel like I received so much information. I laughed, I frowned, I almost wanted to cry, but here we are. I feel more educated after this, and I so appreciate y'all. Please be safe, and I hope to see you in another Ignite space. If you want to share your information below for our participants to reach out with any questions. Fortunately, we don't have time for the Q&A, but that's okay. But yeah. Thank y'all so much to our lovely speakers. I'm going to pass it on to our policy director, Jocelyn Yao, one of my favorite people here at Ignite, who is going to share how we can take this from conversation to action and what role do we want to play in this moment.
Thank you, Lauren. And I'll keep it short. I'll try to wrap this up in 15 minutes or so, because I know it's been a long day, long evening, long week. Oh my goodness. And for folks in the East Coast, I know it's getting late. And something that I'm not sure if everyone followed the news, but so originally we were going to talk about Women's Health Protection Act today. But if you have read or heard about the news, that failed yesterday. So what happened? Let me, actually, I have a slide deck for this. So hold on. Slideshow. Well, yes. Thanks. Thank you, Saha. Saha was actually also, I want to recognize Saha. She was the one who prepared this slide deck. She's the legislative advocacy coordinator. And so thanks for this little reminder. Take a sip of water, stretch, take a deep breath, and recenter ourselves. It's been a very heavy week. And so appreciate all of you for being here still. But yeah, do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself physically and mentally. So let's talk about it. I'm not going to play this video just because I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but let's talk about, I know this has been mentioned. There's so many state laws recently, and even in the past decade or so, there's over 500 state laws restricting abortion, and which is why we need Congress to codify Roe v. Wade. And it's because there's all these state laws across the country restricting abortion access. And we know that people hurt most by abortion restrictions are those who are already facing barriers. And that include, Black, BIPOC, women identifying individuals, those with uteri, and immigrants, and also those living in rural communities. And so, this is why and this is why here at Ignite, we're asking folks to join us in calling Congress to codify Roe v. Wade. We had the chance to do so. And so I already mentioned this, a lot of the states, and if you the darker the shade is, if you look at the map, there's basically more restriction, or basically it's not allowed. Like, for instance, in the state of Texas, it's not allowed to have an abortion. So I'm very fortunate to live in California, but I know that is not the case for everyone. So what happened yesterday was that the Women's Health Protection Act, which was sponsored by Representative Judy Chu, it was brought forward to the Senate floor. It's a federal legislation that would have created a new legal protection for the right to provide and access abortion care free from medically unnecessary restriction and bans on abortion. So that, and that would have been a national bill, that would have been a national legislation that would allow everyone, regardless of where you live, regardless of whether you're in the state of Texas or the state of California, that would have ensured abortion access for everyone. And that was, that unfortunately failed yesterday on the Senate floor. They needed 60 votes to pass. And I believe, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it only received 48 or 49. Can't remember the exact number, but basically it was not even close. And so what we're asking for folks to do is that two things. You could also reach out to your state elected officials and ask them to provide protections, but we know that's not possible in certain states. And so we're also asking folks to take action to ask Congress to codify Roe v. Wade. And you can just scan the code. And also, I believe Saha already dropped. Saha, do you mind dropping? Perfect. Thank you. So Saha just dropped a link to take action in the chat box. It's really easy. It takes less than 5 minutes to take action. There's already a pre-drafted email, which you could personalize it if you want to. There's a pre-drafted tweet. There's a script that you can use to make calls to your members of Congress and U.S. senators. Again, it takes less than 5 minutes, but also second, I encourage everyone to forward this link to at least 5 friends and family. Talk about this issue, share. And we always talk about this at Ignite. Personal is political and political is personal, right? And if your family and friends care about you, which I assume they do, they will listen to you and share your perspective with them, share your stories with them, tell them why this matters to you, and have them take action as well. So I definitely encourage everyone to do that. Can you share? And yes, I will share the slide deck with fellows, with everyone. Actually, I don't mind sharing it with everyone, and we can certainly do that. But that's all that I have for now, and I know folks have to hop off as well. So, any questions before we leave this space? And actually, Lauren, I will pass it back to you. I know there's other ways you can take action as well, in person. So, Lauren, do you want to share the rallies that are coming up on Saturday?
Sure thing. So the Bands Off My Body rallies are happening all across the country, and they're being organized by your local organizations. So if you're interested in joining those rallies, we can definitely work to support you. In Atlanta, I'm gathering some Ignite people, and we're gonna go and stand with the organizations that are rallying already. So if you're interested in doing that, definitely scan the QR code to receive more information. And as well, on the site, you'll see frequently asked questions, ways to stay safe, etc. And if you're interested in joining me, if you're in Atlanta or if you're in Austin, you can reach out to Jess O'Reilly, who's also on this call and who has put their email in the chat super quick. Love my fellow. But that's it. That's a wrap. I so appreciate appreciate you all being here. Let's do this. Let's stay involved. Let's become more involved. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a great night or afternoon. Bye.